Thank you very much, and I call on Des McNulty to wind up on behalf of the Labour Party. I can give you 9 minutes, Mr McNulty.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Before I entered Parliament, I spent 22 years teaching in higher education in one institution, while serving for 6 years as a member of the court of another university. In that context, I actually can put names to many of the people who were displaced from employment under the Conservative years and ended up as students in higher education. But I do take the point that David McNulty made, that there was a very substantial increase in participation rates under the Conservative government, and that was a significant step forward in my view. But I do wonder what my colleagues and my former students would make of the debate we've had this afternoon. Everyone in higher education is very aware that there's a crisis in the sector. People understand that the funding situation is very difficult at the present time and that it will get worse in the years to come. They want solutions. They want to make progress towards solutions. But the tragedy is that no progress is being made in Scotland. The universities are currently shedding staff. Departments are slated for closure in universities all around Scotland. And any principal you speak to in higher education will tell you that the funding model we have is unstable. Now, if every university is reorganising, retrenching, seeking to attract new sources of income, as Ken McIntosh says, by boosting the number of postgraduate students, taking in more overseas students, that might be an individual form of salvation for that particular university, although in a competitive context it's very difficult to see how it will provide a route towards survival. But it's not a route forward for the sector as a whole. And that's why Labour is in favour of a proper, structured, independent review of higher education. That's the urgent task in front of us, to map out what the options are, what the alternatives may be, identify the parameters within which we should move forward, involve all the stakeholders, not just the university principals and National Union of Students, but everybody who has a stake and interest in how our higher education system looks, and do it in a systematic way. And that's what the government is resisting. And if you look at the motion that's been put forward by the Scottish Government, and indeed the amendment put forward by the Liberal Democrats, I mean, what's clear is that they actually don't want to talk about the future of higher education in Scotland. They simply don't want to talk about it. They'd rather actually have a debate about what's going on in England. Now, that isn't what devolution, in my view, is for. We are here with a responsibility to the people of Scotland to organise and deliver services in this country. So why on earth is the government and the Liberal Democrats actually not wanting to talk about the crisis that's there, the pressures that are very, very obvious? No, I won't take an intervention. Now, when it was mooted, this debate, it was suggested through the usual channels that the SNP had cooked up the subject for the debate, perhaps in conjunction with National Union of Students, in order to put pressure on the Liberal Democrats by embarrassing them. Now, surely one should realise by now that the Liberal Democrats are unembarrassable. They've demonstrated that so many times. And it was very interesting listening to Margaret Smith's way of trying to slide round the issue that's been put to her by several different speakers. She had an interesting definition of who is in and who is out of the Scottish Liberal Democrats. Apparently, she is part of the Scottish Liberal Democrats up here, but people like Joe Swinson, Michael Moore and Danny Alexander, who are Liberal Democrats from Scotland down south, don't have to adhere to Scottish Liberal Democrat policy. What's even more significant, well, let me just finish the point and I'll take you. The promise that these people signed up to in the NUS pledge was that they would vote against the introduction of top-up fees. That's what they said they would do. What they have now said they're going to do as part of the coalition agreement is that they're going to abstain. So that's a broken promise, clear, straightforward and simple. And what kind of excuse, frankly, is Danny Alexander going to give when he signs off the financial arrangements that emerge from a new Westminster government should they introduce top-up fees? Is he going to say, it wasn't me, I didn't mean it, I didn't sign it? How can he do that? But perhaps the Liberal Democrats can explain their embarrassment. I'll let Margaret Smith have another go.
Margaret Smith.
I remind Des McNulty of the fact that we are in a devolved parliament. The Labour Party in the United Kingdom brought in tuition fees. The Labour Party in the United Kingdom brought in top-up fees. And in this parliament, we, by working with you, allowed you to redeem yourselves to at least some extent by actually taking away tuition fees from Scottish students. That was because we were in a coalition in a devolved parliament. Now, that's what coalitions are about, and that's what devolution is about. I'm not quite sure where you've been for the last decade.
I've been in this Parliament, Ms Smith. I'd ask you to speak through the chair, please. Des McNulty.
I'm absolutely clear what the Liberal Democrat policy was, what these individuals I've mentioned, in fact, all the Liberal Democrats in Scotland said they were going to do, and what they're saying they're now not going to do. Now, at the end of the day, people can position themselves how they like. They have to respond to the electorate. But the position I would come back to is this. What are we going to do in Scotland? There really is a very difficult issue facing higher education in Scotland. What I want to see is a rational process that actually looks at the issues systematically, identifies all the issues, not just student funding, but university funding. They're not the same thing. Let's look at access. Let's look at the relationship between what universities do and economic development in the broadest sense. Let's talk about our competitiveness in research and how we can advance that and maintain our competitiveness elsewhere. Now, Michael Russell, according to the motion that he's put forward, sees the only catalyst for change as actually being the Brown Review. Well, the Brown Review, if it's acted on, will be a catalyst for change. But it's not the only trigger for change. The crisis is there and evident to everybody in higher education now. So what is the way forward? And why is it that Mr Russell is prepared to speak to principals, he's prepared to speak to the students' organisations, but he's not prepared to put any of his ideas in the public domain? He said to the Times he was having conversations. We have no information about the content of those conversations. He hasn't put on record any of the individual issues he's raised. He said that a graduate contribution might be on the agenda, but if you listen to his backbenchers today, they don't think it's on the agenda. If he can't even be honest with them, how on earth is he going to be honest with the rest of us, or indeed with Scotland? Now, I believe this Parliament deserves a lot better. There is an important issue in front of us, which is what we do about the university sector in Scotland, what we do about student funding, what we do about all of the issues surrounding that. That issue deserves not a review by the great and the good in isolation. What it requires is a systematic evaluation with options identified, alternatives looked at, and a systematic debate across Scotland. That is what the government is denying. That's what the universities want. That is what they are being denied. And the reality, of course, is that in any rational debate about the future of the universities, there will not be a single university view. Every university will have its own interest, its own particular point of view to put forward, as will other stakeholders. There will be different points of view. Why can't we have that debate? Why can't we have it in an open way? And why can't we reach a sensible resolution? That's the debate we should be having in the Parliament today. I very much regret the fact that both the Scottish Government and the Liberal Democrats would rather have a different partisan debate all of their own.